What occurs when the existence you've carefully constructed reveals itself as a fragile illusion? He possessed everything: a flourishing profession, a luxurious condo, and a fiancée so ideal she seemed sculpted from marble. He'd abandoned his modest, understated former spouse for this glamorous new reality, certain he'd achieved the supreme advancement. Yet one startling news story, one familiar name from his history, emblazoned on the gossip columns alongside a magnate, alters it all. This isn't merely a tale of romance and regret. It's about the horrifying instant you comprehend that the individual you discarded could have been the sole authentic element in your world. David Marino thought existence was a framework you engineered, not an occurrence that befell you. Each component needed precision, every connection flawless. At 38, he examined his masterpiece from the 28th floor of his Central Park residence, experiencing a profound, gratifying sense of accomplishment. The New York horizon sparkled in response, a vast symbol of drive, reflecting his own essence. His fiancée, Victoria Hayes, formed the cornerstone of this edifice. That evening, she was organizing a supper gathering, gliding through their sparse, artwork-adorned home like a dancer. She embodied crisp, refined lines and gentle, deliberate expressions. Her gown, a sheath of sapphire satin, adhered to a physique shaped by yoga sessions and self-control. She was, simply put, impeccable. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her palm brushing his spine as she glided by. "The Harrisons are absolutely praising the chef." Her tone was a soft, harmonious murmur, the sort that drew influential figures closer. "You selected them, Victoria. Your judgment is flawless," David responded, clasping her fingers. It seemed the appropriate response, the dialogue crafted for this moment. He held a top position at an esteemed design company, and Victoria managed public relations for high-end labels. They formed a dynamic duo, a label in their own right. Their acquaintances, the Harrisons and the Lynns, shared similar backgrounds. Attorneys, doctors, investment experts. The dialogue blended seamlessly with discussions of economic shifts, Cape Cod vacations, and benefit events. This was the existence he had selected. This was the existence he had forsaken Sophia for. The memory of his previous wife emerged unexpectedly, a specter amid the celebration. Sophia Reed. Dr. Sophia Reed, he amended mentally, though he seldom acknowledged her degree. She specialized in youth therapy, a field he'd once viewed as honorable, but eventually deemed insignificant. Her realm involved worn rugs in public health centers, crayon drawings, and perpetual sessions addressing issues that defied schematic solutions. Their union had been cozy, serene, and he had ultimately concluded it lacked drive entirely. It resembled an entry-level dwelling, and he sought a towering structure. The separation had been amicable yet resolute. He informed her he required greater things. He never elaborated on what those were, but Victoria personified them. Victoria grasped the value of connections, of displaying achievement. Sophia had considered his professional gatherings exhausting. Victoria excelled in them, gathering contacts and accolades with equivalent poise. "David, you're lost in thought," Robert Lynn remarked, twirling the rich crimson in his goblet. Pondering that fresh gallery proposal, David returned to the moment. "Along those lines, it's a challenge." He dove into a sure description of the endeavor, sensing the accustomed surge of mastery. He excelled at this. He could dominate a gathering, promote a concept. Afterward, while tidying the remaining elegant stemware, Victoria reclined against the granite counter, her ideal grin at last revealing a touch of weariness. "It succeeded," she declared. "It wasn't an inquiry." Victoria avoided doubts. "Naturally it did. You were exceptional. The Harrisons suggest we apply to the Sailing Society." She examined her polished nails, a subtle beige. "It would benefit us for your enterprise. Whatever you deem appropriate, dear." He relied on her insights completely. She served as the societal designer of their existence, and her plans were impeccable. He encircled her midsection, breathing in her costly fragrance. He experienced a rush of not precisely ardor, but deep appropriateness. This represented triumph. This was the summit. He had exchanged tranquil ease for radiant splendor, and he had never regretted it. As he slipped into slumber that evening, the city was a soothing tune beyond their expansive pains. A last transient vision of Sophia invaded his thoughts. He recalled her chuckling in their former untamed yard in Oakwood, soil streaked on her face, her locks in a disheveled knot. It was a gentle, dimmed snapshot from an existence he no longer inhabited. He dismissed it like dust. She formed part of the base, concealed far below the shining metal and pains of his fresh reality. He assumed she was okay, pursuing her tranquil, limited existence. He wished her contentment in her manner, but her joy, or absence of it, bore no relevance to his. He was certain. He was a designer, ultimately. He understood which barriers supported weight and which could be demolished without hesitation. The message came on a Wednesday dawn. It wasn't addressed to him outright, but relayed by his sibling Emily with the header, "Is this Sophia?" David was amid a layout assessment, the atmosphere dense with Java aroma, and a subdued discussion of his group debating the advantages of polished copper over dull ebony fittings. He accessed the message absent-mindedly, anticipating a relative's image or a report on their native area. What he encountered caused the schematics on the surface to haze. It linked to a Business Insider digital piece. The title was striking and unyielding. Innovation leader Marcus Hale and Dr. Sophia Reed unveil 100 million youth wellness program. Beneath the title was an image. It wasn't a candid snap. It was a refined, expert likeness. A gentleman with warm gaze and a graying whiskers stood embracing a lady. The gentleman was Marcus Hale, the secluded, nearly legendary creator of Technova, a figure whose fortune was mentioned in reverent whispers akin to a country's economy. The lady was Sophia, but not the Sophia he recalled. The Sophia in the image glowed. Her tresses, which she formerly tied carelessly, were arranged in gentle, elegant curls. She donned a plain yet sophisticated indigo outfit that accentuated assurance he had never witnessed. No sign remained of the stressed, mildly remorseful lady he had departed. The expression in her gaze was straightforward, lucid, and tranquil. She appeared formidable. David perused the initial section, his pulse starting to thump an odd, irregular beat against his chest. Marcus Hale, the pioneer of Technova, has quietly influenced charity for years, but now he emerges prominently with his companion Dr. Sophia Reed, a foremost child development expert, to introduce the Horizon Project. The organization seeks to transform access to youth emotional support nationwide. "This isn't my endeavor," Hale commented in a private discussion. "This is Sophia's concept. I'm merely the fortunate one assisting with the framework." His companion, Sophia's concept. David sensed a surge of dizziness, as though the ground had slanted under him. He navigated downward past statements from Sophia addressing structural obstacles and creative treatment approaches, her wording precise and scholarly. The piece referenced her latest writings, her invited talks at Columbia University. It depicted a portrait of a lady at the pinnacle of her field, a lady he failed to identify. "David, we require your approval on the illumination diagrams," his assistant Tom mentioned, drawing him from the electronic void. "1 second," David barked, his tone sharper than planned. He exited the meeting space and entered his transparent office, closing the entrance. He rested against it, loosening his necktie, which abruptly seemed constricting. His thoughts surged, a disordered mix of rejection and bewilderment. Marcus Hale, the individual, was virtually aristocracy in the innovation sphere. How? When? Sophia detested those groups. She loathed the pretense, the chatter about assessments and depletion paces. She was the one who perused verses and nurtured a produce patch. A chilly, repulsive idea crept into his consciousness. She's after wealth. It was a primitive, protective reflex, and he grasped it. It must be that she had contrived her path into this. But as he examined the image once more at the authentic warmth between her and Hale, the rationale rang empty. Sophia wasn't manipulative. She was the most sincere individual he had ever encountered. And Hale's statement, "This is Sophia's concept," it wasn't regarding his fortune. It was concerning her efforts. The efforts David had rejected as trivial. The entrance swung open and Victoria entered, carrying 2 mugs of Java. I was nearby and figured my talented fiancée could use a boost, she sang, her grin impeccably radiant. She placed the Java on his workstation and then spotted his display. "What's this?" She bent forward, her sense surrounding him. Her gaze skimmed the title. Her grin held, but it stiffened, turning fragile and edged. "Oh heavens," she exhaled. "Is that your Sophia?" She uttered the name as if it were an alien item in her lips. "It is," David stated, his tone even. Victoria remained quiet for an extended period, her impeccably groomed digit rapping on his workstation. She wasn't gazing at Sophia. She was eyeing Marcus Hale. David could nearly perceive the computations occurring behind her clear azure gaze, the assets, the communal leverage, the immense magnitude of it all. "Well," she uttered at last, her tone strained with a feeling he couldn't identify. It wasn't astonishment or compassion. It was nearer to irritation. "I guess even a faulty timepiece is accurate twice daily." She stood tall, adjusting her garment. "Don't allow it to affect you, love. It's a temporary sensation. We have a design association event on Saturday. I've secured our spot with the Rockefellers. That's the priority." She sent him an air kiss and departed, leaving him solitary with the illuminated display. A temporary sensation. The Rockefellers. She had handled the data not as a personal occurrence, but as a tactical obstacle on a communal game board. He gazed at Sophia's image at the lady who was meant to be a subdued note in his expansive life account. She had just commandeered the whole tale. And for the initial occasion in years, David Marino, the expert designer, sensed he had no clue what the plan was anymore. The report of Sophia and Marcus Hale spread through their communal group with the velocity of a financial downer. It wasn't blatant. It was a sequence of delicate, disturbing alterations. It was how individuals' gazes lingered on him an extra moment at the golf club. It was the exaggerated cheer in their tones when they inquired, "So, have you noticed what your former spouse is doing? How marvelous for her." Each reference was a minor wound. David discovered himself preparing for it in every exchange. He and Victoria were at an art exhibition in Soho, a stylish converted warehouse brimming with the metropolis's upper class. Victoria was thriving, a sight in ebony, effortlessly maneuvering the assembly. David, though, felt as if clad in an unsuitable outfit. David, old chap, it was Edward Klein, a veteran finance director and a man David had always aimed to captivate. "Just viewed the update about your previous wife. Remarkable. Marcus Hale is revolutionary. She's achieved exceptionally well." He patted David on the back, a motion that seemed less like fellowship and more like compassion. "Yes, it's fantastic news," David succeeded in saying, his grin resembling an inexpensive disguise. "You must feel such pride," Edward's spouse, Patricia, added, her gaze sparkling with false sympathy. Pride, the term stuck in his gullet. He wasn't proud. He was something different, an intricate, poisonous blend of feelings he couldn't label. Bitterness, confusion, and an odd proprietary fury he lacked justification for. She was his serene, modest former spouse. How dare she evolve into this individual without his consent? Victoria saved him, guiding him aside with a courteous pretext about needing to converse with the exhibition curator. "Cease permitting it to impact you," she whispered harshly, her hold on his limb unexpectedly firm. You appear like an injured animal. It's unattractive. It's not that straightforward, Victoria. It is. You selected me. You triumphed. This is merely an unusual occurrence, she stated, her reasoning as keen and chilly as the bubbly glass in her grasp. Now go discuss with Thomas Grant about the Hudson Valley endeavor. Appear assured. He followed her directive, but the exchange with Thomas seemed vacant. All he could contemplate was Victoria's response. There was no compassion, no grasp of the intricate background he shared with Sophia. There was solely image control, their image, David and Victoria, the ideal pair. And Sophia had just flung a stone through their impeccably arranged showcase. The Fishers began to appear elsewhere. Several days afterward, they were enjoying a meal at a fashionable eatery Victoria adored. David was attempting to address a substantial obstacle at his job. A regulatory problem was endangering to postpone his gallery endeavor by months. And the municipal board is being totally unyielding. He was expressing, seeking some encouragement. Victoria wasn't attentive. She was browsing her device, her forehead creased. "Have you seen this?" she inquired, rotating the screen toward him. It was a social media update from a notable New York influencer. An image of her and Sophia toasting at what appeared to be an exclusive brunch. The description stated, "So motivated by the exceptional DR. Sophia Reed and her amazing efforts, privileged to back the Horizon Project." "She's omnipresent," Victoria grumbled, a poison in her inflection that surprised him. "She's being pursued by the whole philanthropy committee, the one I've been striving to join for a year." "Victoria, I'm discussing my endeavor. The largest of my profession," David stated, his annoyance erupting. "It's collapsing." She eventually glanced upward, her azure gaze restless. "Love, issues resolve. It's your specialty. But this," she motioned to her device, "is a publicity emergency. Our commitment celebration is in 3 weeks. We must direct the story. We need to ensure our tale is larger than hers." He gazed at her. She wasn't his ally. She was his promoter. He had a gaping injury, and she was providing him a media statement as a dressing. For the first time, he pondered what a dialogue like this would have resembled with Sophia. She would have heated. She would have placed her palm on his, her forehead wrinkled with true worry. She would have posed inquiries, prepared him a beverage, and recalled that other occasion he'd confronted a dilemma and surmounted it. She was a therapist, ultimately. Her whole existence revolved around attending to people's troubles. He had swapped that for this, for a lady who viewed his dilemma as a bothersome diversion from her ladder climbing. That evening, rest provided no refuge. He envisioned their former residence in Oakwood. He was attempting to display Victoria the plans for his fresh existence, the gleaming tower he'd conceived, but the sheets were empty. He glanced upward and observed Sophia in the yard. She wasn't regarding him. She was conversing with Marcus Hale, and with each phrase she uttered, the yard became more vivid, the blossoms flourishing in improbable hues. Meanwhile, the base of his tower was disintegrating into grains. He awoke drenched in perspiration. Victoria slumbered peacefully next to him, her respiration steady and gradual. She resembled a stone figure in the faint moonlight, lovely and inaccessible. He sensed an immense feeling of isolation, a solitude so deep it resembled a bodily pain in his torso. He had informed everyone, himself included, that Victoria was impeccable. But impeccability, he was starting to comprehend, was frigid and barren. It offered no space for chaotic human elements like apprehension or uncertainty or the spirit of a history you believed you had effectively interred. And his history was not merely unearthed. It was organizing benefit brunches and being celebrated by the metropolis's upper echelon. The unavoidable occurred 2 weeks prior to the commitment celebration. David was at a benefit for the New York Philharmonic, an occasion Victoria had demanded they participate in. It was an ocean of formal attire and sparkles, conducted in the lavish main lobby of the concert venue. He stood solitary briefly, having just evaded a dialogue about boating when he spotted her. Sophia was on the opposite side, near the grand stairway, immersed in discussion with a lady he identified as a primary art supporter. Marcus Hale was absent. She was unaccompanied, yet she didn't appear so. She seemed entirely composed, maintaining her position with a subtle elegance that attracted others. She wore a basic ankle-length ruby frock. It wasn't ostentatious, but on her it was breathtaking. She appeared more vital, more joyful. The constant glimmer of unease he recalled in her gaze had vanished, substituted by a steady, unwavering glow. His heart performed a sorrowful, intricate jolt. It resembled viewing a known landmark following a ruinous tremor. The outline remained identical, but all surrounding it, the whole terrain, was permanently altered. He experienced an unreasonable impulse to conceal, but it was overdue. As if detecting his stare, she pivoted her head, and their gazes connected across the bustling space. For a pulse, the clamor of the event diminished. He observed a spark of astonishment in her demeanor, but it was swiftly replaced by a calm, courteous impartiality. She offered a minor, nearly undetectable inclination, then returned to her dialogue. It was an evident rejection, a polite recognition of a past associate. It hurt more than any furious eruption might have. He didn't comprehend what drove him, if it was vanity or a frantic desire to grasp, but he discovered himself advancing toward her. The trek across the stone surface felt like kilometers. When he arrived, she was wrapping up her exchange. The other lady wandered off, and they were isolated. Sophia, he uttered. Her name seemed odd on his lips. David, she answered, her tone balanced. It was the identical tone, but the rhythm differed. The hesitant interrogative quality was absent. I didn't anticipate encountering you here. Victoria's on the planning group. He clarified, the phrases feeling awkward. You appear healthy. It was a feeble minimization. She appeared luminous. Thank you. Likewise. There was no resentment in her tone, merely fact. It was disconcerting. He was ready for wrath, for sorrow, for discomfort. He was unprepared for this peaceful poise. I viewed the piece, the organization. He faltered. It's extraordinary. Felicitations. Thank you. It's required much effort, but it's the most vital work I've undertaken. She discussed it with an enthusiasm he hadn't observed in her since their 20s, when she was initiating her clinic and trusted she could alter the globe, one youth at a time. He realized abruptly that he had gradually extinguished that spark in her with his own drive, rejecting her aspirations as charming while proclaiming his own. I had no notion you were advancing it on that magnitude, he conceded. A slight melancholic grin graced her mouth. There is much you were unaware of, David. The assertion lingered between them, keen and accurate. You perceive what you desired to perceive. He wished to debate, to justify himself, but he couldn't. She was correct. He had confined her in a category marked cozy, undriven spouse, and had never troubled to examine further. Where's Marcus? He inquired, immediately lamenting the query. It sounded envious. He's in Geneva for a summit. He wished to attend, but he's relying on me to speak for the organization. She expressed it so factually. There was no necessity to dazzle him, no doubt. Just then, Victoria materialized beside him, her grin a brilliant protective exhibition. Love, here you are. She regarded Sophia, her gaze sweeping over her from crown to toe in a rapid, rejecting evaluation. Sophia, how unexpected. Victoria, Sophia stated, her equanimity steadfast. Pleasant to meet you. I'm certain it is. Victoria cooed, entwining her limb possessively through David's. It must be so exciting for you to be at a gathering like this. You and Marcus are the buzz of the city. It's quite abrupt. The suggestion was evident. You don't fit here. Sophia didn't engage the provocation. It's been a storm. She concurred serenely. But when you possess an opportunity to perform significant efforts, you seize it. I'm sure you comprehend. The understated jab struck true. Victoria's grin constricted. Well, we must depart. The governor is awaiting us, Victoria stated, tugging on David's limb. So delightful to encounter you again. As they retreated, David ventured a backward glance. Sophia was already involved in a fresh exchange, chuckling at something a gentleman was expressing. She hadn't observed their exit. For her, the meeting was concluded. She's become arrogant, Victoria remarked, patting her lips with a cloth. It's unflattering, David didn't reply. He was replaying the dialogue mentally. There was much you were unaware of, David. You perceive what you desired to perceive. He regarded Victoria at her impeccably styled locks, her gem studs, her unyielding, tactical grin. He had perceived what he desired to perceive in her as well. An emblem of accomplishment, a lovely, refined adornment to his ideal existence. He was only now commencing to realize that he had never troubled to delve deeper. He had exchanged a genuine lady for an impeccable veneer, and he was the sole one who hadn't comprehended it was a dreadful deal. The commitment celebration was Victoria's triumph. Conducted at an exclusive venue facing the river, it was a harmony of ivory blooms, bubbly cascades, and subtly restrained music. Everyone of importance in their sphere attended, their combined riches and sway generating a tangible energy in the atmosphere. This was Victoria's retort to Sophia's assent, a demonstration of strength, a proclamation that she and David remained the leading duo, the ones to observe. David performed his role. He grinned. He greeted. He received well wishes with a rehearsed comfort. But internally he was splintering. Every exchange felt like a show. Every chuckle felt insincere. He felt like a performer in a drama he no longer grasped. Clad in attire that was overly constricting, he found himself observing Victoria. She was captivating, an impeccable organizer floating from one prominent attendee to another. But he viewed it differently now. He saw how her gaze flitted around the space, perpetually evaluating, connecting. He saw how her grin never fully warmed her eyes when she addressed someone she considered trivial. He saw the exchange-based essence of every interaction. The tipping point arrived halfway through the night. They stood with Victoria's guardians, an imposing pair who regarded David with a detached scrutiny of financiers inspecting their holdings. I must admit, Victoria, her mother, Sophia stated, I was concerned momentarily. All this buzz about David's initial wife, it was growing rather noisy. But this gathering is the ideal reply. It's repositioned the story solidly where it should be. Of course, Mother, Victoria stated. It was a basic issue of emergency handling. David felt a wave of sickness. His existence, his background, his separation, all diminished to a publicity issue to be handled. It was scarcely an emergency. David inserted, his tone more strained than meant. All three turned to regard him, astonished. Love, don't be innocent, Victoria stated with a mild, superior chuckle. A lady of no pedigree abruptly linked to one of the globe's wealthiest men. It mirrors on you. It mirrors on us. We needed to refresh people's memory of your exquisite preference. She tapped his torso, the superiority, the nonchalant harshness of her phrases. It resembled a lever being activated. The meticulously built barrier within him ruptured. Pardon us, he stated, grasping Victoria by the arm and directing her steadfastly toward a private balcony overlooking the shadowy, swirling currents of the Hudson River. David, what are you undertaking? I was conversing with my guardians, she whispered, pulling her limb free once outdoors. Your mother labeled my existence a story. You labeled my history an emergency handling issue, he stated, his tone subdued and quivering with an anger he hadn't realized he held. Is that all this represents to you? A label to be handled? Don't be overly theatrical, she mocked, enveloping her arms around herself. This is the realm we inhabit. Appearance is paramount. I believed you grasped that. It's why you're with me. The accuracy of that assertion struck him like a corporeal impact. She was accurate. He had chosen her for her appearance, for what she symbolized. And what if the appearance is fracturing? He retorted, what if I'm fracturing? Victoria, my gallery endeavor is teetering on failure. I'm facing career humiliation, and all you discuss is which position we're occupying and how Sophia's fortune is tarnishing our image. Your endeavor will recover. You're David Marino, she stated dismissively. And naturally, I'm worried about our appearance. Our whole existence relies on view. Don't you understand? The correct view secures the finest endeavors, the finest society admissions, the finest existence. We are constructing a dominion, David. Don't become a hindrance. Hindrance, the term suspended in the chilly evening breeze. He wasn't her ally. He was a resource, and he was declining in value. My lord, he murmured, the insight emerging in its complete, terrifying lucidity. You don't cherish me. You have no concept who I am. Victoria emitted a brief, acrid chuckle. I know precisely who you are. You're a gifted designer who desired a lady who could equal his drive and construct a realm with him. You departed your timid little spouse because she couldn't achieve that. I can. I am. This, she motioned toward the sparkling gathering, is what you desired. So don't dare become emotional on me, now, simply because she struck gold. He gazed at her, truly perceiving her for the initial time. The impeccable traits, the superb gown, the cultivated allure. It was all protection. Beneath was a merciless tactician who viewed bonds as influence and individuals as resources. He had been so captivated by the wrapping that he had never checked the interior. That's where you're mistaken, he stated, his tone quiet but distinct. I didn't depart Sophia because she lacked drive. I departed her because I was timid. I feared my existence wouldn't be exceptional enough, and I faulted her for it. But her existence is exceptional. It always was. I was just too sightless and too conceited to perceive it. Victoria's countenance, for the first occasion, forfeited its calm. A veil of icy wrath descended over her features. So what are you declaring? You erred. The query suspended between them, a cliff. The music from the gathering appeared to taunt them. He regarded the dim river, then back at the lady who was intended to be his tomorrow. The tower he believed they were erecting together was merely an empty shell, and a tempest was approaching. He lacked a response for her. Not yet. But he knew with an assurance that froze him profoundly that the base of his ideal existence had just disintegrated to particles. The days following the commitment celebration were an examination in frozen quietude. David and Victoria navigated their residence like two envoys from conflicting countries, their dialogues restricted to essential practicalities. The splendid framework of their bond had been exposed as a theatrical backdrop, and neither knew how to perform without the lines. David felt as if residing in a mist. He attended his job, participated in sessions, and examined plans, but his thoughts were distant. It was unearthing the debris of his union to Sophia, attempting to identify the precise instant he had committed such a disastrous error. He required to converse with someone who knew the prior version of him, someone who had witnessed him with Sophia. He contacted his sibling Emily. They convened at a modest, simple cafe in her district, a spot with faded seating and the odor of stale Java, a universe distant from Victoria's selected dining spots. Emily, a sensible, direct trauma nurse, took one glance at his expression and remarked, "Heavens, David, you appear dreadful." He offered a feeble grin. "I sense I'm there." He disclosed everything. He admitted his superficial reasons for departing Sophia, his vanity-fueled chase of an ideal existence with Victoria. He depicted the calamitous commitment celebration, Victoria's frigid, tactical perspective of their bond, and the disturbing meeting with the fresh, assured Sophia. Emily attended patiently, mixing her Java. She had always favored Sophia, a truth she'd never concealed. When he concluded, she was silent for a prolonged instant. "You know," she stated eventually, "I never comprehended why you departed her. I mean, I heard your explanations. You diverged. You sought different paths. It all resembled business lingo for a split. I persuaded myself it was valid," David confessed, his tone. "I informed myself she was restraining me, that her realm was too confined." "Her realm wasn't confined, David. It was profound," Emily amended him softly. "She was handling youths who'd experienced things you can't conceive. She was preserving existences in her manner. You were constructing lovely structures, which is fine, but she was reconstructing broken youths, which is more limited." The query impacted like a strike. He had never considered it that way. He'd gauge her achievement by the area of her workspace and the renown of her position, not by the effect of her efforts. "Recall that occasion you forfeited the offer for the Riverside endeavor about a year prior to departing her?" Emily inquired. David grimaced at the recollection. It had been his initial major independent endeavor, and losing it had been a crushing impact to his pride. "Yeah, I was devastated." "You were," Emily concurred. "You sulked for weeks. But do you recall what Sophia did? She didn't instruct you to move on or connect more. She investigated the company that succeeded, discovered defects in their layout, and devoted 2 weeks aiding you assemble a counter-offer to the municipal board. It didn't succeed, but she invested all she possessed into assisting you, into trusting in you when you didn't trust yourself." He had entirely overlooked that. The memory surged back with a disgrace so fierce it scorched. How could he have overlooked? He had been so absorbed with his own defeat that he had accepted her enormous endeavor as expected. "She was your greatest advocate, David," Emily stated, her tone gentle. "And you exchanged her for a supporter who only supports when you're succeeding." He sank back in the seat, the inexpensive material creaking in objection. "Victoria thinks Sophia struck gold." "Perhaps she did," Emily stated with a gesture. "Or perhaps this Marcus Hale fellow is just intelligent enough to perceive what you possessed all along and were too foolish to value. Sophia didn't merely get fortunate. She's intelligent. She's compassionate. She's committed. A fellow like Hale, who can possess anyone globally, probably doesn't desire a attractive flatterer. He desires an ally, someone authentic. The expression resonated what he had been sensing. Victoria was a performance. Sophia was an individual. He had been so enchanted by the performance that he'd forgotten the worth of the individual. "What do I do, Emily?" he inquired, his tone breaking. "I can't respond to that. But you need to determine what you truly desire, not what appears impressive on documents, not what will captivate the Harrisons or the Lynns. What do you, David Marino, the fellow who used to construct intricate block metropolises in our cellar, truly desire for your existence?" They remained in quietude for a bit longer. The cafe's ordinary babble, a setting to his inner reckoning. He contemplated those block metropolises, the delight he'd discovered in invention for its own purpose, not for praise. When had that shifted? When had he begun requiring his existence to be a memorial to be admired remotely rather than a dwelling to be inhabited? He departed the cafe, feeling like a sufferer who had just obtained a fatal prognosis for an ailment he'd possessed for years without awareness. The ailment was his own vanity. His drive had become a malignancy, spreading and demolishing everything positive in its route. He traveled home, not to the barren, silent residence in Central Park, but to Oakwood. He stationed on the road outside the modest stone house he had shared with Sophia. Another household resided there now. A youth's cycle lay overturned on the grass. He could see illumination inside. He recalled the yard in the rear, the one he'd always grumbled was excessive labor. He recalled Sophia out there, patient and concentrated, encouraging growth from the earth. She hadn't required a magnate to assist her cultivate things. She had always known how. He was the one who had been residing in sterile soil. Returning to the residence resembled entering a gallery display of an existence that was no longer his. Every item, the smooth European couch, the conceptual artwork Victoria had demanded, the glass containers on the liquor trolley, felt like an accessory. Victoria was there, seated in a chair, illuminated by the cool glow of her computer. She glanced up when he arrived, her expression indecipherable. "We need to converse," David stated, his tone lacking its usual command. It was merely a declaration of truth. She shut her computer with a gentle snap. "I concur." She rose, an elegant, smooth action. "I've been reflecting. The gathering was regrettable. Your conduct was unacceptable, but I'm prepared to overlook it. We need to display a cohesive appearance. I've already composed a declaration for our marriage date to distribute to the gossip sections. It will redirect the attention back to us." He gazed at her, stunned. She was still attempting to handle the story. She hadn't absorbed a word he'd expressed on the balcony. She hadn't noted the tremor, only the dishes clattering. "Victoria, halt," he stated, raising a palm. "Halt composing. Halt planning. Halt handling. Just attend." He inhaled deeply. "This isn't functioning. We aren't functioning. We aren't allies, Victoria. We're jointly promoting a commodity, and I can't continue." Her countenance stayed impeccably calm, but a perilous sparkle emerged in her gaze. "Don't be absurd, David. You're experiencing a temporary error in judgment. You're sentimental because your former wife received a fortunate opportunity." "No," he stated, shaking his head. "My former wife obtained the existence she merits. This isn't about her. This is about us. It's about the reality that you viewed my career dilemma as an inconvenience and my emotional distress as a hindrance to our label. It's about the reality that you don't cherish me. You cherish the notion of being Mrs. David Marino, spouse of celebrity designer, and I don't cherish you either." The phrases once voiced were frightening and freeing. "I was so eager to construct this ideal, triumphant existence that I chose you to be the ideal, triumphant spouse," he proceeded, the admission flowing from him. "It wasn't equitable to you, and it wasn't genuine to me. I wasn't seeking an individual. I was assigning a part, and I am profoundly regretful for that." For the first occasion since he'd encountered her, Victoria's veil of impeccability fragmented entirely, her countenance distorted into an expression of pure, unfiltered anger. "You're regretful?" she hissed, her tone low and malicious. "You're ruining my existence, and you're regretful? I have devoted 2 years nurturing our appearance, establishing our connections, securing us entry to the proper venues. I suspended my own drives to manage yours, and you're discarding it all because your pitiful little former wife is abruptly prominent. You are feeble, David. I believed you were a predator, but you're just a pathetic minnow returning to the small reservoir you originated from." The malice in her phrases was astonishing, but it only strengthened his determination. This was the authentic Victoria, the one who viewed bonds as leverage and people as assets. "Perhaps I am," he stated softly, "but I'd prefer to be a minnow in a genuine reservoir than a predator in a glass enclosure, feigning it's the sea." "Depart," she murmured, her frame stiff. "This is my residence, Victoria. I want you gone," she yelled, her tone fracturing. She seized a weighty glass container, a marriage present they'd obtained prematurely, and flung it against the barrier. It shattered, dispatching fragments of crystal and liquid scattering across the refined timber floor. "I want you and your pitiful emotion out of my view." He regarded the broken crystal, then at her, her chest rising, her lovely countenance twisted with rage. There was nothing remaining to express. The destruction was finished. He advanced into the sleeping chamber, retrieved a valise, and commenced packing, his actions automatic. He took his garments, his volumes, his private belongings. He abandoned the sleeve fasteners she'd purchased him, the costly timepiece, all the attributes of the man he had been pretending to be. When he returned to the main room, valise in grasp, she was on the call, her rear to him, "Mother," she stated, her tone already converted back into a smooth, managed tool. "There's been an alteration in arrangements." "No, all is well. It's just David's company is relocating him to their Paris branch. It's an amazing chance, but the schedule is challenging. We've resolved to delay the marriage indefinitely." "Yes, regrettable. I'll manage the declarations." He lingered there momentarily, attending to her weave a fresh story, effortlessly transforming their split into another computed publicity action. She was already reconstructing, placing a new base over the debris. He exited the entrance and didn't glance back. The gratifying snap of the latch behind him was the sound of his own freedom. He was without home, unattached, and his profession was at risk. His ideal existence was in debris, and he had never sensed such relief. 6 months elapsed. Fall transitioned into a harsh New York winter, which ultimately yielded to the hesitant fresh buds of spring. For David, it was a period of subdued rebuilding. He didn't relocate to Paris. He settled into a compact, practical unit in a district that didn't demand a pass for access. He stepped down from his leadership at the company, accepting a lead creator role at a smaller, more creative firm that emphasized eco-friendly neighborhood-focused initiatives. The salary reduction was notable, but the efforts felt purposeful for the first time in ages. He wasn't erecting tributes to affluence anymore. He was conceiving reading halls and communal hubs. He was constructing spaces for individuals, not for publication features. He attended counseling. He sat in a serene space that carried a faint citrus and dust scent and discussed his father's unyielding drive, his own ingrained dread of being average, and the enormous conceit that had prompted him to handle Sophia's emotions like a throwaway sketch. It was arduous, humbling labor. It was the most difficult thing he had ever constructed. He seldom learned about Victoria. He knew from a past associate that she was now involved with the investment director, an elder, richer man. He envisioned she was prospering, her story smoothly revised. He harbored no resentment toward her, only a remote sympathy for the man who was now featured in her drama. He learned about Sophia even less. The Horizon Project was a subdued, enormous triumph. It was altering regulations, supporting facilities, and emerging as the new benchmark in youth emotional care. Her efforts were self-evident. She didn't require the gossip sections anymore. One windy Saturday in May, David was strolling through Central Park near his former residence. He was drawing in a journal an ancient practice he'd revived, attempting to seize the contours of a flowering cherry tree. He glanced up, and there she was. Sophia was strolling on an adjacent trail with Marcus Hale. They were clasping hands, their digits loosely linked. She was chuckling, her head tilted back, a noise he vaguely recalled, but which now appeared fuller, more echoing. Marcus was regarding her, not with worship, but with a profound, relaxed fondness. They appeared like two individuals who had discovered their precise, correct spot in the world, and that spot was beside each other. David's breath halted in his chest. A known twinge of loss, of remorse, resounded within him. It was the ghost appendage of an existence he might have possessed. He sensed the bite of his enormous error, the complete burden of what he had discarded. But then something else enveloped him. It was a serene, deep feeling of tranquility. He perceived her joy not as a verdict on his defeat, but simply as a reality, a positive and correct reality in the cosmos. He hadn't ruined her as he had once dreaded. He had only been a barrier she had with time and poise maneuvered around. Her triumph wasn't concerning him. It had never concerned him. It was concerning her. He remained where he was, partly concealed by the tree, and observed them depart. He didn't wish to converse with her. He didn't wish to disrupt that tranquility. He had nothing to provide her, and he no longer required anything from her. Not pardon, not another opportunity. Her joy was her own, and it was whole without him. That acknowledgment was his salvation. He glanced down at his journal, at the partially completed illustration of the cherry tree. He contemplated the new communal hub he was conceiving. It had a small yard plan for the courtyard. He noted to include a seat, a serene spot for someone to rest. He shut the journal. The existence he possessed now was smaller than the one he had planned for himself. It was more tranquil. It wouldn't appear in publications. There would be no events, no sailing societies, but it was genuine. The barriers were sturdy. The base was reliable. And for the first time in a very long time, David Marino felt like he was finally at home.